I think a salesperson should always feel like they're in a race against someone else.
It's still really overachieved, but we needed to create some sort of a little bit of parity in terms of what we would expect.
Movie tickets as a surprise at the end of the month can be more motivational than money in the bank that gets taxed.
How will you identify quickly enough, is that person working out or not?
Over time, things start to come undone when people feel like they're being hard done by, and people will always find a way in the sales space to go, I want more because X has got Y.
We have Mike Pritchett, founder of BuzzTrail.ai. And then we also have David Wilkins, who is the founder of SDR Leaders of EMEA and co-founder SDR Leaders of the USA. And I believe you have something pretty exciting. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself in a tad more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. More detail than not saying anything, you mean? I can do that. Excellent. So Mike Pritchett, founder of BuzzTrail. I live in London, Aussie. Apologies for the accent. My background has been as an entrepreneur for the last 20 years. So I built and scaled and sold a couple of companies. My last company was Shootster, which I sold after bootstrapping out of Australia. We ended up in 7 countries. We had 72% of the world's Fortune 500 companies as clients, and that got up to 150 employees. Sold that 3 years ago and started BuzzTrail around 12 months ago.
As a loose agenda for today's session, we'll talk about 2 golden rules of comp plans, the foundations of a great comp plan, key elements that are involved. The first golden rule, David, will come to you. Make it extremely simple.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do with salespeople is not make it clear how they make money. If you're in sales, you are going to be use the term coin operated for everything that you do. All your activities and actions you want to see an impact to your bottom line in your bank account at the end of the month. So if you have a 5-step comp plan where you get different things for different stuff, if you make a comp plan where you are not directly going to have some impact and you getting paid, that is the quickest fire way of having a sales team not be motivated, not be productive, and leave your company.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's no CFOs should be involved in formulating comp plans, except just to check at the end that they're actually going to make money, but not formulating the way they're structured. And we've all been there. If you've closed a deal and sat in a boardroom or on a Zoom call or whatever and closed a deal, you're already calculating the comp that you're going to make and what you're going to spend it on. And the last thing you want to do is find out at the end of the month that you were wrong, and therefore you're just dejected for the rest of the time that you're selling.
The second golden rule off the back of that, which fits quite nicely to what you just said, Mike, is whatever happens, do not change the comp plan.
Yeah, I think, David, you had a couple of stories from previous chats we've had around this backfiring majorly, didn't you?
I've seen in the past where comp plans were put in place at the start of years, and then through no fault of the sales rep, they've overachieved. At one point, it was 200% of their quota in the first 6 months of the year. And instead of that being seen as great, and we need to encourage that, people's comp plans were doubled halfway through the year, and the compensation that was going to be owed to them was not given. And that had the knock-on effect of people leaving the business a month later. And if we're trying to incentivize our teams to, again, the right behaviors, and the right behaviors are adhered to, and then that happens, that really creates a descent in the ranks.
Yeah. I look at everything through the lens of a founder and the holistic business and how to incentivize everyone. But the sales team specifically, it's the first thing you set up when you set up a sales team, and you get even the first SDR or the first AE on, you're just focused on how am I going to comp them to get the right results. When I started my last business, it was just myself doing the sales, and then I brought on one guy and we got started, and it was such a simple comp plan because I'm a simple guy, right? And I'm not that bright. I'd just go, there you go, that made sense. I'll give them half of the first month of revenue. That's it, right? When the client pays us. And that was it. So super simple. They got half of the first month in that first month, and everyone was happy. I built the business to 10 million ARR and about 20 or so salespeople on that model, and everyone was happy, and it worked beautifully. We then got a CFO involved. We then changed a few things. We got more and more advanced and corporate and complex, and it totally screwed with everything. And all of a sudden, everyone was wanting a piece of the pie because, well, hang on, this engineering are actually, adding to that, and other people are adding to that. And there were so many different layers of complexity that we ended up probably spending more in comp than we were actually making on some of the deals. It was just absurd, and no one knew what they were making. So back to our earlier simplification thing, the complexity change, even if it ended up being that they could get more, it just felt like a punishment.
What are you rewarding with a comp plan? What behaviors do you want to drive?
You've got to look at what are the goals for the business and what's going to be the drivers that are needed at the business. So if it's that new logo acquisition, then that's got to be a big major component of the comp plan. But you've also then got to ensure that the people who are in your territory are going to be able to help you achieve that. Likewise, so there's no point in having a renewal part of it or an expansion if you're not doing expansions. The other piece is around not wanting to create an atmosphere where AEs are sandbagging deals, meaning they hide them up until the last point, or they hide it and bring it in a following quarter because it means that they're not going to make as much money themselves. You need to make sure that the compensation plan that's been put in place is giving that clarity and also the incentivizing for them to do those right behaviors that you do want.
There's a fun story about the Cobra effect, which I love. If you indulge me a second to tell the story, it's quite funny. It's really about when the British took over India. Originally, there were cobras everywhere. And of course, they went in and said, well, we don't want cobras everywhere. Somebody came up with a simple solution. Well, we'll pay the locals $1 every time they bring us a dead cobra. And they said, okay, well, this is fantastic. And they started lining up all these dead cobras. They were achieving their results. This is great. Then weeks later, months later, years later, they're going, what on earth? Like, how can this country have so many cobras? And of course, the locals were just farming cobras and then killing them and bringing them in, making $1, off they went, which is the exact thing. It's incentivizing the wrong behavior, but they still get the result, which you gave them a very simple tick box of what they need to achieve. And this level of sandbagging and twisting deals or moving deals to be 2-year deals instead of 1-year deals, but a lower amount per year, all these sorts of things I've seen so many times. And if there's one thing I know, if a salesperson can rig a system, they will rig a system, and they'll rig it to make an extra $1 or to have an extra chance at something, even if it's not good for the company. Now, a lot of that can come down to company culture, but I think at the end of the day, if you make it possible or, give that level of, tweakability for them to make more money in their paycheck at the end of the quarter, they're going to take it. So really be careful as well around what level of teamwork that incentivizes as well. So SDRs sometimes make a comp out of what an AE gets and other ways around. There's lots of ways that marketing may take some. I remember a friend of mine worked in a pancake store in Canada, I think it was, when she was younger as a waiter, and had to pay a tip to the kitchen and to the busboy and to this, that, and the other. It ended up being that if she didn't get a 12.5% tip, she lost money for serving a table, which made her avoid some tables. If they weren't typical people to tip, she'd go to the American tables, try and get more, because she would actually lose money. And that sort of level where she was competing against someone else and begrudge the kitchen afterwards is the exact same problem here with if AEs are saying, well, I don't want this particular deal because it's come from an SDR, I'm going to lose a chunk, I'm going to focus on the deals that I can get myself. You've got to make sure that whole well-oiled machine really works in sync.
Yeah, 100%. David, sort of looking at teams you've managed in the past, obviously well experienced in the SDR world, have there been any instances where really an SDR or an AE has gamed the system because really they've been either incentivized on the wrong things or been given a loophole that they could jump through? Yeah,
100% on the SDR piece. It's we experienced this myself as an SDR, then also as leading a team where you have a comp plan. Let's say it's meetings completed is the comp plan, and then maybe education enablement team want to do a spiff, help you do a spiff to incentivize the team to book more training meetings for the team. So the value, the overall contract value is going to be in the single digit % of what they should be going after. But for the BDRs then themselves, they're getting paid because it's classed as a meeting, and it doesn't create the right environment that you're trying to do, which is get either net new meetings with an account or expand into different use cases. So yeah, experienced it both as a part of a management team and also as a BDR.
I think that's the age-old question of BDRs, SDRs is, Should they be commissioned but targeted on meetings booked or meetings sat? Right. Eager to hear, well, either of your thoughts on that. What is the thing you want to drive when you're setting up a comp plan?
For me personally, it's all about the money, right? At the end of the day, I don't care how many meetings someone books, how many conversations they have, anything else. I want money in the bank, full stop. And I think that's the same for any business if they're actually honest with themselves. So, if they book a meeting in an AE's calendar and it's a bad meeting, as in it's just it's not qualified properly, et cetera, that should be a negative. It should be commission taken off, not commission put on. So that approach of, is it sales qualified? It has to be sales qualified, and the AE has to tick it off. And that then obviously can cause, tension one way or another, but I think they're things you've just got to work out.
If you're in a place where there is that there is a lot of potential and it's a really overachieving territory, then the plan there has to be some sort of equality-ish compared to maybe a territory that is maybe not as productive. It's maybe brand new. We did it in the past with how we set up Middle East, which was a really prime location for us in terms of our technology, versus somewhere like France, where it was a lot harder to do the role. And that person in the Middle East still absolutely, they were top PDR of the year. It's still really overachieved, but we needed to create some sort of a little bit of parity in terms of what we would expect.
How much of a say do you think the rep, whether they're joining a company or renegotiating their comp plan, how much of a say do you have in it versus they have in it in that process?
Oh, I can say that ultimately it's the business that has the final say, and there can be a conversation, absolutely, but it gets to a point where this is the comp plan. You either sign it or then you're not going to get paid on anything. And I think there has to be some sort of conversation, absolutely. But at the end, it's a business that is trying to be run, and the only person who's going to be affected ultimately is the seller, who's not going to sign their comp plan.
Anything to add with that one, Mike?
Yeah, I completely agree with David. I'm maybe a little bit Steve Jobs on this one. I just think it's a bit my way or the highway. If I own the business and I've set a comp plan, it's normally something I've set before even a sales team comes along. I've been in sales for the last 20 years, so I guess I feel confident to do that. If founders or sales leaders don't feel confident, get the advice first, do it right, do it thoroughly the first time. But if every single person that comes into your sales team, you're changing the sales for them depending on their wind direction, you're just going to go nowhere. And I think that's when you create that confusion and somebody go, but hang on, well, they negotiated a better sales rate, so every time they win a better deal. Like, you want one team, one dream, and everyone feeling like they're getting a fair go. I think that conversation, as David says, is important. Make them feel heard, understand. I want reps to be able to live off their base, and their kids aren't going to starve, but I want them to be living the dream and hiring a super yacht in the south of France off their comp.
When you're looking at the base salary and then the OTE, which includes either the meetings booked or the revenue generated, where do those numbers come from as an SDR? You're
trying to look at what was the revenue goal for the year, and looking, or sometimes in the next year after that, depending on the set length of sales cycle. And then you're trying to look at then, what was the contribution of that revenue that came from the team, from the BDR team, and then looking at then the pipeline that was generated. So you're doing this kind of like backwards waterfall maths to try and determine, what is it to get to a number of that what we need from our territory to help achieve that revenue goal. And then the way that a lot of sales cycles in the enterprise side, it's 9 months. And so really the work that you're doing in 2025 is not going to show until 2026. So you're actually building on the BDR side a comp plan that is based on what the forecast is going to be for the revenue in the following year. That's how it's built in most companies.
It's interesting. It's similar for sort of on the AE side, Mike, with the sort of that reverse engineering. Is there any more detail needed for the AE side? A bit more maths, or what does that look like?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not very smart, so I just start with really basic numbers. I want to make sure the company can make money. I want to make sure the AE is making what's in line with market. and I just try and keep it super simple. And it's one of the challenges with a startup, and I'll speak from that world because that's what I'm in. When you start a company, you have no idea. You don't even have an idea that the product's going to sell, right? You just hope it does. You sold a couple yourself, and now you bring somebody on and go, you can achieve all this. You want to make sure they can, and you want to make sure you've tried it yourself and you've done it to a degree, but it's a little bit of this, which, if I'm honest. And so you've got to have a level of forecasting where you say, okay, we believe we can achieve this. And that's where I do bring a sales rep in. I say, okay, well, I sold 3 of these widgets last month. This is what we've laid out in a forecast. Do you think you can sell 2 of these widgets every month? And if they say, yes, I can crush 2, you go, okay, great. Well, 2's the number. Are you happy with 2? Yeah, 2's the target. We've agreed on a target. And then for me, it's about just saying, okay, is there, and there was this survey that went around earlier this week, which is great. AE's earning a base of sort of 96 to 100 and upside to 185 thereabouts here in London. Okay, great. That's enough for me to go, there's a ballpark. And if they've said, I which most reps do, and I always ask people, what do you expect to earn in this role? Here it is. And you can start to just line it up and go, is their expectation in line with how many widgets they can sell? And if they sell that and my comp lines up with that, do I make money? Right. And then, a lot of businesses, it's really about, okay, you make some money on year 1, maybe, or at the moment, the forecasts seem to be SaaS businesses aren't even making money until well into year 2. But from there, can you continue to make money off those clients with their customer lifetime value? And that's another part of comp as well. Are you paying on year 2, 3, 4? And is that a downwards percentage from there? It is quite complicated, but to start with, it's just get something in place that everyone agrees is going to, get close to their numbers if they hit what they think is achievable.
Yeah, that lines up quite nicely to Richard's point, which sort of reading between the lines is when revenue comes in for a company with AEs, what percentage of that revenue should then go to the rep rather than the company? What does that split look like?
Mike, that's a you question.
As I get my calculator out here. Okay, so like I said, not very bright. My first comp plan was just half of the first month, right? And we paid that. I think that ended up to be something like 4.5%, of total revenue, whatever it might be. I should have done the calculation. Half the people on this call are going, he can't do math. So that was an idea for me to just keep it super simple. Our average deal was about $4,000 a month. They got $2,000 for landing that deal. Simple. That then evolved and we ended up a lot higher in percentages and other things, and there was more complexity there. I don't have a strict number, to be honest. It depends on your product. What's your customer lifetime value? What's your average revenue per account? And then taking the percentage of that and if they can land X amount of widgets, do they land within what is a reasonable range, right? Like you don't, I make jokes about I want my reps on super yachts in the south of France. I don't want reps making millions of dollars for just doing an average job, obviously, because that just means I'm throwing away cash that I don't need to throw away. I want good reps making above average revenue in their space for their role, right? And I want bad reps not making enough to live, so they move on and go elsewhere. Like that's the other thing. When you talk about high performance teams, I'm not actually interested in sales training. I'm not a sales training organization. I will train salespeople, but I'm not a sales training organization. I'm a business there to make money. And as a business there to make money, my main priority is to move on politely the reps that can't achieve what they say they're going to achieve and find new ones that can. So the comp plan's got to be able to do all of those things without you getting involved.
We'll go on to the next point, which lines up with what Steve asked, actually, is, and this is this splits opinions a lot. I've heard Benjamin Dennehy feel very strongly about this, probably the other way that we're going to say. What are the thoughts on commission-only schemes in startup environments?
On my side, I understand the reason. However, how will you identify quickly enough what is that person working out or not? And have they got the incentive to, if there is an issue, for them to improve on those behaviors? That's my high level thought on that.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah. Look, I tend to agree. Every startup founder wants to find the dream commission-only salespeople. right? Like I'd have 50 startups if I had a room of 1,000 commission-only salespeople. I'd just put them to work in a million different areas, of course. But I think there's a reason it doesn't really work long term. And I think sales is fun, right? Sales is fun, and we got in. We didn't become accountants. We became salespeople because we love people, we love the energy, we love the pace, right? And so for me, if you're building a sales team, we used to have so much fun. We sat around I sound like such an idiot saying this was so much fun, but it was. We sat around a big table, put jugs of water in the middle, and we all had to scull as much water as we can. And then we had to go, right, 20 phone calls, go. No one's going to the toilet until you get to 20 phone calls, right? And then you're starting to make, like I'm talking about connects, not just phone calls. And so you're getting through to 20 people. And by the 20th conversation, you're like, yep, I just next Tuesday we're free and we could book this in. And you're really sort of hurrying things along. And the whole team energy there is hilarious and it's fun. And then you go and have a celebratory laugh at lunch and then you come back and do it again. You can't get people into a room playing those games, bleeding the company blood and really passionately knowing the product in a way they have to drive sales if they're commission only sitting in their own bedroom and also working 3 other gigs. So my overall thinking is that it doesn't work, and sales is about the team really bleeding the company colors.
That makes sense. So we think we've really just settled on having, especially like you said, with an AE base, you want them to be able to support your family and their drive and motivation in the company is the commission they'll earn. Yeah. When it comes to working out those salary bases, you talked about it a little bit before, Mike, with just average for the area, what they say, and you've got an idea. David, sort of on the SDR front, where does that come into play? Because obviously there's a wider range of experience of people in the SDR role than in the AE role, so that must be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, it is. And so we did and we're going to do it again this year, a State of EMEA sales development survey to really get some sort of an understanding of what are the differing salaries for per city around Europe. And then also we asked about what should the OTE ratio be. And overwhelmingly, it was a 70-30 split in terms of salary and commission, and the reasoning is that you want as you said, you want them to be able to live off their base, and you want them to not worry every month about can they feed themselves and pay their rent, because then you're starting to get desperate people who cut corners, and that's a bigger problem. So that was the big reason why. And when I started out as an SDR, I was on a 50-50 split, and it was tough sometimes. And so when I moved to a company and I was on a 60-40, I was like, oh, that's great. I can now actually know I'm going to pay my rent every month. And I think it just helps you settle down a lot more.
Yeah, you don't want people being nervous and distracted about can they buy dinner for their family, right? You want people in a position where, okay, look, I'm fine, but boy, I really want this. And then you can work out who the ones are with the gusto and the energy and the flame in them to go after it.
If an AE was to come to you, Mike, and say that you've positioned here a 70-30 split, well, actually, I feel more comfortable. I feel like I could earn more if you reduce my salary, but increased my commission percentage. What would your immediate thought and answer be to that of an AE asking you?
I'd probably be impressed, but at the same time, it would depend on the stage of the company. If they were the first rep to come along and I'm a nimble startup and I can do whatever I feel like, I'd probably give it to them. I'd probably say, that's great. You're backing yourself. Go for it. Love that. If I'm established and I've got 10 reps and everything, I'm just going to upset the apple cart. And I just honestly think it comes back then to keep it simple and don't change it. And, no matter how much people aren't supposed to talk about their salary to each other, everyone does. And so you end up in this position where, one rep's comparing it to another, and salespeople are competitive by nature. So they're going to instantly come back, and people won't see the fact that he's taken a lower or she's taken a lower base. They'll just see the fact that they're getting more comp, and they'll ask for more comp. And you're going to end up in this awkward situation.
I've been aware of over the last few weeks of an AE that is not paid any salary and is on 100% commission and gets a higher percentage than the overall contract value they brings in at the same company where people have just a standard comp plan, and he's a contractor for that company.
So is that person coming from the outside as a contractor as opposed to they're a full-time staff member, I guess?
They're still full-time. They've got a very large quota, but then they have that earning potential that they make a lot of money. And that's in the same space as other people who are full-time employees of the business.
How's that worked out? Has there been any sort of conjecture from other salespeople, or is it fairly new?
It's I need to investigate a little bit more on that. I've got to find out.
Because I love the idea, and personally, I'm an ADHD all over the place founder that loves to throw crazy things at the wall and see if they work. But I just, my experience has been that over time, things start to come undone when people feel like they're being hard done by, and people will always find a way in the sales space to go, I want more because X has got Y, and you end up with this kind of, I need less problems in my life, not more.
It's really all about the team and making the team feel valued as a whole as well. You don't want so much disparity between earnings.
It's just like, as a salesperson, you want to wake up, I want my salespeople to wake up in the morning knowing they've got one goal, one thing to do. No, they don't have to think, like, we're not that smart, right? We don't want to be sitting there, solving the world's problems. We have a product, we have to find a client need, and we have to make the product fit the client need and help them out, and that's it, right? And then pass it off to people that can go do the doing. If they're sitting there trying to have a PhD on whether they made more than Tom or if Sue made more than them, it's going to be, they're just distracted, right? And so even down to all of the tech tools and half of the AI things out there and all these other things, they're great for sales leaders, for CROs, for marketing managers to dive into. But the salesperson almost needs to just be kept in a bubble and told, make your calls or make your outreach or do whatever it is you put in place for them. And so when it comes to any variation, in my personal opinion, on comp, unless it's like an outside partner, like we have outside partners that will make money and they'll make a higher commission, or an outside contractor sales organizer, that can do. But as far as a full-time employee in my team, I just want them all singing from the same song sheet. I think a salesperson should always feel like they're in a race against someone else. If they're in a new territory, especially, never hire a new person in a new territory that can just say, oh, it's really hard over here. It's like, well, okay, well, why is the other person that I hired next to you kicking ass and you're not, right? You want to have that tension. I love the idea of let's all hold hands, sing Kumbaya and make money together. But I think once again, you're going to get to this fact that next week, somebody's going to be in an HR or to their CRO saying, you got to get rid of Tom. He's just not performing and he's bringing the whole team down. Sue's great. Let's get another Sue. I don't need people thinking about other things. I just need them running their own race and kicking goals. What are your thoughts, Dave?
The big thing is, again, you're trying to create competition because you're trying to make everybody grow and the company grow. And if you have a team, I get it sometimes having a team number if you are working a major account and you've got a team of 4 AEs that are all working together on and there being a component of the comp plan where, hey, if we've got to close 100 million in Volkswagen, and there's if we hit that, then we get something. I get that piece, but for it to be an overall number where there's no one has a quota per se, then I think that creates a real I think Matthew King said it's the quickest way to mediocrity.
You've seen that go wrong on the SDR front, where the SDR team has to book 50 meetings between them, and it's gone wrong because people have mixed performance.
Yeah, I've never given a comp plan that's been communal. I would run a million miles.
And I put up on, I used to put up a live tracker of people's performances, and I would put it in red, yellow, green about if they're less than 50% of quota, if they're between 50 and 99, and then green if it was 100. So everybody saw what they were doing. That was the best motivation you could do, because you didn't want the head of sales walking past the team and saying, oh, Noah, you're in the red. What's going on? You want them to go, oh, Mike, I see you're in the green. Congrats. That's the quickest way to really drive the right behaviors.
Yeah. Well, can I dive in with one thing? Because I completely agree, David. And I'm just trying to think about the hippie community love kumbaya comment that I made. I don't want to sound like I'm not about teamwork. We did something that I think is a little bit of an interesting mix there, and we might touch on it later on. But incentives don't always need to be just your base and commission either. So what we did back in Shootster, we had 7 countries, and we started a thing called Sprint to 100. It was very simply, we sent out these little sprinting men, sort of cutouts, and they were stickers, and we sent 100 to each office. Every single deal that was landed, you put a sticker on your wall in the office, and the goal was for each office to sprint to 100. Whoever got to 100 first, that whole sales team got flown to another office of their choice. So they could fly, the London team could fly to Sydney and celebrate, right? That was the approach. That got everyone together in each region as a team. So even though they're fighting each other for their own comp and they're keeping their money to themselves, and their wives aren't complaining that somebody else at the office is dragging their heels and therefore they can't go on a holiday. Like, there's none of that nonsense. But there's a competition overall where they're working as a team in competition against another country. And so I think that's a really interesting way to play it. And any way that, regardless of whether you got regions or not, any way that you can play it where as a group, if we hit X, we're going to get Y, that doesn't need to be monetary. I think that's a really cool way to do it. And literally movie tickets as a surprise at the end of the month can be more motivational than money in the bank that gets taxed.
Going back slightly to what you said before about like non-financial rewards that can help reps still feel value, that could be built into a comp plan.
I think tax implications is a big thing. So in some countries and for some businesses that are regulated, you have to declare any sort of monetary spiff that you get and receive. So I know a previous company, if we did a spiff, it would get, in one country, it was taxed at 54%. And so if you're then doing if giving somebody 50 euros, then they're not getting a lot of that. So sometimes, as Mike mentioned, things like cinema tickets or even just like giving people a day off or half a day off, that's so much more impactful for them and also for their mental health, and get them to feel like have done a good job. And so thinking of things like that, where you just giving them something where it's not going to cost them any money, but it's, they are getting time to recover and be refreshed and actually get a free day of not working. Something like that is really powerful.
Absolutely. In regards to tax implications, I'm not a tax advisor, and any advice I give should be checked off with an accountant. But I do find there are better ways to incentivize people than just straight up cash. And it's not also about just the amount. Like, for example, if I said to anyone on this call, you're probably all seasoned career professionals, and if I said to you, wow, your comp this month's going to go up by £150, you'd kind of go, man, you know how hard I've worked and you give me £150 extra. Come on, like, seriously? And it's going to be taxed and everything else. It's nothing. My wife won't even notice it happened, for example, or my husband won't notice it happened. My kids don't care, like whatever. And it's a tiny bit of money and it just goes on the mortgage anyway, as opposed to, hey, I've booked a really nice table for you and your partner at this particular restaurant and you've got a dinner out this Friday night. What? That's amazing, right? And it's an experience and they're enjoying it. And so, those sorts of things that actually affect their loved ones and themselves are going to have such a better effect on their mental health, on their performance, on their attitude, on their partner's attitude to them working late hours or whatever it might be they need to do. It's just worth so much more. And also the other thing is don't be a tight ass. Have a pool aside in your company to surprise and delight. I think surprise and delight is so great. Somebody gets the end of the quarter, they kicked ass, they were the leader in sales, they get their comp, they get all the things they expected, and then you buy them a bonus dinner out. That's the kind of thing that makes people go, wow.
Yeah, and with these non-financial rewards, is it that it is a surprise at random, or is there any more ways in which the rep can work towards those incentives?
I think competitions are great, like the competition we did with the Sprint to 100. Whatever those competitions are, try and make them last a longer period of time and be something that people are really enjoying. And once again, that doesn't even need to be financial. Like we're all going away on a retreat, but the person that gets to the highest amount of sales gets X as well, or whatever it is, or gets to pick where we're going, and here are the 3 locations we could go. It doesn't need to be anything big. It's just recognizing. Public recognition for people is huge, and it comes back to knowing people's love language as well, right? Like, what is their love language? What lights their fire? Is it money? Maybe, maybe not. It'll definitely be a component of it. Just test that by not paying them and see what happens. They'll leave. But their love language may be recognition in front of other people. There may be just kind words of affirmation. Like, there's plenty of things that you need to know as a sales leader that lights the fire of your sales team, and then shape it to that. And it may be different per person. Yeah.
Personally speaking, as a sales rep, they are the surprise element of these non-financial incentives are the best. Just being given even as a little thing like, here's a £15 Starbucks voucher.
Oh, massive.
Your coffee's paid for coming into work.
Yeah.
It makes such a difference. And you've got a little bit more of a spring in your step, making it feel like you're more valued past money.
Yeah. Silly things like it might be old school. We had a sales bell in the office and I'll have a sales bell again for BuzzTrail. I think it's fantastic. That feeling of ringing the bell. And it wasn't even about winning a deal. Everyone didn't speak about, I'm going to win a deal. They go, I'm going to ring the bell. And then when they ring the bell, the whole company, we're in an open plan office, it was 450 square meter sort of Google style warehouse. And, you got 100 people yelling and screaming and hooting and hollering because you rang the bell and even then when SDRs kicked us and they'd get their SDR that got the deal to them and they bring them up and they ring it together and it's this team excitement around it. I think those sort of dopamine releases are hugely important, and sales is hard and sometimes is a massive grind. So when you've got that win that you get to celebrate, I think it's key.
100%.